There we go. Jordan, how are you?
I'm happy to be back.
Yeah.
Glad to see what we come up with, what we touch on, what we learn today.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm really grateful to get the opportunity to expand on the conversation. It's absolutely fantastic last week. So great to have you back. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Perfect. Yeah. So one of the things I'd like to start the momentum building with is one of my observations that, you know, I was very conscious of the fact that, and you brought this up as well yourself, you articulated this yourself. It's like you have a leaning towards noticing somebody going through experience and then wanting to kind of like make sure that there's an honoring and a validation and attention that lands on the feeling that the person's getting as they experience something. And I found that your inquiry was motivated to give rise to a self inquiry in the person. And I wondered how conscious you are of that being an aspect of your way of interacting with people.
Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, when you hinted at this, it's really nice to be seen for this because it is something that I have cultivated. And the practice of relatefulness is really built on cultivating this in ourselves and with others. Yeah, there's something. It, in a way, I really feel like it's practicing A Course in Miracles. Like we're consistently, like the workbook lessons, like nothing I see has any, I can't even remember the right words right now, but there's this kind of sequence right at the beginning, like nothing has any meaning. And then God is all the meaning that I see because God's in my mind and I'm projecting it. And there's this kind of muscle that the workbook trains us into, like this inquiry with experience of like whatever you think is going on is not actually what's going on. And as you start to inquire, even very simply, like just a few minutes in the like kind of meditation sessions of the workbook, you start to notice, oh yeah, like I do give everything the meaning it has for me. And so I feel like it's just using that muscle and building it in so that it's all the time, that I'm just constantly in that inquiry of like, what's the meaning that we're giving to this? And if we can choose, if we can develop that awareness, we can start to choose to switch from like the ego's point of view to the Holy Spirit's point of view. And that's the way I think of that kind of honoring and validating, is that the I can't remember exactly the quote again. It's kind of escaping me right now, but Jesus says something, or the voice of Jesus in the Course says something like, I'll honor and maintain complete respect for your miscreations, but I won't uphold them unless they're true. So it's that honoring and that complete respect for what you're going through, because there's no threat to me, to peace, to God, to reality, no matter what you're feeling. And so I don't have to fight it. I don't have to fix it. I don't have to do anything with it except be here and respond to the call for love with love.
Absolutely spot on. Love that. Yeah. And then that comes back to the atonement being just, all you've got to do, all I've got to do, all we've got to do is just accept our part, which is to just undo our belief in something that never happened.
Right. Right. And so this inquiry process of like, well, what's it like right now? It's as simple as that. What's it like to have your smile and your eyes kind of soften and we're in it with the listeners and they're starting to look at your smile or my smile or notice their own smile. Um, it's yeah, I feel like it builds to exactly that. And of course, as I started doing that, I just got into presence and forgot the direction I was going with my words. Here we are.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Experience in action.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me think of some notes that I had that could perhaps be a valuable prompt, which is about it's about like the freedom of inclusion and how inclusion itself brings freedom. I wonder what that summons up in your thinking.
Yeah, what comes up in response to that is the nature of us being kind of relational beings. Like we normally come into a relationship or a moment thinking like, well, I have my history and my identity. I was doing something else, and then I came into this call, and out of that moment, now a Leon Jordan arises. But that's like that's certainly rings true, but it feels like it at best half of the equation. The other half is like there's this Leon Jordan tunnel or line segment that I'm being defined by. And so there's this sense of just in including you and how you like I'm always being impacted by everyone and everything all the time.
Mm.
I think that can be really scary for people when they start to realize like, oh my gosh, like I'm constantly being impacted by all my relationships. They can feel a real fear of losing freedom. But for me, it's the exact opposite. Like that the impact is going to be there no matter what.
Mm.
And so I'm actually, it kind of frees me up to realize like I've already always been this way my entire life, and I'll always continue to be this way. There's a kind of joinedness or interconnection, or I think this is kind of what the course talks about when it talks, or one way I can interpret the sonship
Mm.
is this like we're always impacting each other,
Mm.
and yeah, and it's recognizing that I feel playful. Like I almost like I was just thinking about the image of a slack line. You know, you have to get this. You have two trees, and this is like the people, you
Mhm.
and me,
Mhm.
and you actually want to kind of like crank up the tension so that you can play on the in between.
Nice.
Yeah. So our differences, our uniqueness, our individuality is not a problem. Our ego is not even a problem. Our separation is not a problem
Mm.
when seen through the eyes of the Holy Spirit. It's just something that creates that slack line, which is like a trampoline that we can play on.
That brings to mind as well. I know last week we touched on some um, characters outside of the course, such as like Professor Brian Greene and Roger Penrose. Are you aware of Donald Hoffman?
I really, really like it.
What a surprise. um, I'm thinking about his definition of, I think he uses the phrase like conscious agents. So he would say that I'm a conscious agent, you're a conscious agent, but the combination of Leon and Jordan is a conscious agent as well. Is that kind of circling in around what you're talking about with the relational connection?
It is, yeah. Yeah, I don't know that I would put it in those words, but it is that kind of idea that you can like I like the image of a tunnel, or sometimes I think I got this maybe originally from this developmentalist Robert Keegan, where he talks about if you have like a toilet paper roll,
Mm.
the if you think of each person as like the end of the toilet paper roll, they are distinct, they're different,
Mm.
but they aren't anything other than an empty space. They're defined by the connection, but what they are is the beginning or the end of a connection. And so it's kind of switching to that, and what that's a fun game to play. We can do it. We can kind of do it right now and just be like, oh, you're right. If I think of myself as the end of the connection here, I don't need you to change it all. I can change our connection by going over here or going over here. And it changes the whole tunnel, the whole toilet paper roll.
Brilliant.
So I'm totally free. And this is what like metaphorically I think of the process of forgiveness is like I don't need you to be different because you've never done anything to hurt me in the first place.
Mm.
But what I do is choose not to change the world, choose to change your mind about the world. And so I'm like, right, changing my mind is moving myself or changing who I am in such a way that the relationship changes.
Mm.
And people can't help but change in response. And I think everyone's probably had this experience where they've learned to set a new boundary or to value themselves in a new way, or even just took on a new hobby or a new career or something. And at first, people like mostly a lot of times people will just move with you. And sometimes there's resistance because it calls up something in them, and then they might try to remind you of your old identity and kind of try to bring you back into the old habits and old patterns that you have. And so sometimes if they can't move and evolve with you, that relationship goes away. They choose to move there into the tunnel further back.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so there's something I want to touch back on the freedom of
Yeah,
this.
I can feel that too. Yeah, freedom of inclusion or the inclusion of freedom. It's like a double-sided identical principle or something. I don't know if
Yeah,
it helps.
there's something else where it's like you just don't the power is yours to change. It actually to me feels like if I'm just this autonomous billiard ball entity rolling around as this sovereign individual, sure I can change me, but like then I have to exert so much force to make another ball move. And it's very hard. And so I'm basically at effect of the world, and it's very disempowering.
Mm.
That's how most of us walk around our days thinking about the world. Oh, the US has this presidential election happening, and it feels like, yeah, that how my little billiard ball, how am I going to make a change against that?
Mm.
From that point of view, that makes sense. But then and so I have no freedom.
Mm.
I can't change it. But when I start to instead shift and realize, like, oh, but I do get to change my side of things and how I relate to that and how I relate to everyone else relating with that. And it suddenly opens up all like I don't have to ever get into an argument. I don't I don't have to judge anyone. I don't have to think less of someone who votes for one candidate or the other. I can use whatever I do start to judge as ways to grow and see myself and my projections. It's just like suddenly this world of of scarcity and scary kind of shadows becomes a world of potentiality. And it's all out there for the taking, but I don't have to take it either. There's no push or rush because the abundance is so great. If I don't get the forgiveness lesson today, I'll be able to forgive myself for that. Just like always, every single moment, that new freedom, new freedom, new freedom.
Excellent. I love that. I'm just going to pull something up. So I've got the freedom of inclusion. And then I've also got, you give freedom away when you judge, and you constrict the free flowing nature of being into a thought form, an operational structure, a set of definitions with parameters.
Mhm.
Does that some conjure up for you?
Yeah, there's something that in integral language we'll talk about kind of construct awareness, and Course in Miracles language we talk about the like words being symbols of symbols, where like in actual fact of our experience right now, there's not anything that exists unto itself. Like if you just look phenomenologically, there's no computer screen or voice or self or wall or device or whatever that exists outside of our construction of it with meaning and with language. It's just in this moment, this kind of everything happening. It's happening. It all is. It's all one. In some true phenomenological sense, it's all just occurring on the screen of consciousness. So it's like when we can recognize that, we get a lot of freedom to draw boundaries wherever we want to draw them. I don't know how to not draw boundaries. Maybe that's kind of the moment of revelation. But like, so there is a kind of boundarying that happens to just engage and like move things. Like I want water, I'll pick up this. And but yeah, this incredible freedom comes.
Mm.
And I want to ground this for a moment. Like when I'm in this state of flow, it feels that as easy as I'm talking about it. It feels like, yeah, it's all here, and somebody can get really mad at me and I can be like, "Oh, are you okay? Like you seem really like you're struggling," because I'm free to make meaning. I'm free to divide their experience. Instead of saying they're mad at me, I can say, "Oh, look, they're really hurting and they need some love."
Mm.
But I'm not always in this experience, and I'm sure plenty of listeners are
Yeah.
relate. Like there, and I think that it's just so important to just continuously bring that forgiveness practice to ourselves, like the self-compassion. And this is the other thing that I like the self-inquiry for, this relatefulness
Mm.
and honoring, because like you are the world, or you are what you see, or projection makes perception. The more I can practice loving and accepting you as you are, wholly, 100%, and
Mm.
inquiring into you, the more I'm able to do that with me,
Right.
and vice versa.
Lovely.
It's like I can work on that love and that compassion in either direction, out or in, because they're actually the same.
Mm. Yeah, lovely. That's making me think of like when it says, the Holy Spirit uses relationships as classrooms. And like you
Yeah.
say, the directionality of that attention and that focus, there is no in and out, there is no me and you. So it's just one relationship. And then interestingly, when you say about the boundaries and picking up water and the parameters of existing, it's relative reality, it's relationship with a glass with some water in it, or relationship with two people. And it reminds me of something someone was telling me about, Byron Katie, saying, if she thinks she's going to drink some water, she explains it as like looking down to see which one of her hands picked up the glass, and then went, oh, it was that hand that picked up the glass.
Hmm.
It's still relative because we are having an experience of relative reality in form, but yeah, without overlaying our own judgments, which are meaning, then we allow something to be what it is
Right.
without limiting it to a belief or something.
Right. And I think one of the most counterintuitive ways that this kind of shows up in our experience is in allowing ourselves to be immature. It's just very confusing to like, because a lot of course students are like always trying to be the best student possible. And like, this is why Ken Wapnick, our favorite guy, will say, if you meet another course student, run. Uh, because a lot of times, yeah, we're holding ourselves to these impossible standards, and it's not an expression of love. That's not what the Holy Spirit's doing. That's believing in the illusion and
Mm,
thinking that we have to correct things here in the world of form.
mm,
But it's ideally we're correcting at a much deeper level. And so what this looks like often for me is giving like myself, or if I'm leading a session, like giving room for, hey, it seems like you're angry, and why don't we set a 5-minute timer and try to get as angry as you can for the next 5 minutes. I've never had anyone last for more than a couple minutes. You finally give yourself that permission to fully experience, it almost always moves the energy into what's a deeper level, sadness, or self-loathing, or something.
mm.
The same is true for anything. I think a lot of times, like someone listening to this might feel a lot of self-judgment, like or doubt, like that never worked for me. I've tried that. I've punched pillows, and it's
Mm.
like, right, if you can allow yourself that full permission without any judgment, like cool, like let's just say you're a very critical person. Like, let's take it seriously. Like, let's just go all the way. Give yourself a container, maybe, but to really let yourself be that. There's something in that permission or that allowance. And maybe you don't, I wouldn't always, I do not condone all expressions of certain things. Like if self-loathing, like doesn't mean hurt yourself, or
Yeah.
anger doesn't yell at someone, or
Mm.
sadness doesn't mean lay in bed all day, or whatever it is. But to give yourself just a few minutes to like fully allow that, the presence of that in your experience, it almost always transforms into a deep acceptance that moves the energy into something else.
Mm. So giving it the platform to be expressed almost like exposes that it's got burnt out in that initial form that it came out in, and because it can't be maintained and does get burnt out, then what is underneath comes into focus. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. There's something about that resistance that kind of feeds the kind of secondary reaction, or feeds the, you could say feeds the projection.
Mm.
When you let it be, oh, it's okay, we can have it. It's like, it's almost like there's nothing for it to hold on to. And so it's like, all right, actually what I really want is this.
Yeah, brilliant. Hmm.
And there's enough, like I'll give a weird example, that like something I've seen for a bunch of people is like something like attraction in a group setting, like, oh, I'm really attracted to this man or this woman.
Mhm.
Uh, Most of the time people think immediately they go to, this is a sexual thing.
Mm.
Like maybe we should date or we should hook up or something. But if you allow that to be present and just see, well, I'm curious about this energy. Cool, I've got a big attraction. I don't know what it's for. I don't know what anything is for.
Mhm.
Let's just let it be here and get curious about it and inquire into it and investigate it. Then almost always I've found it, at least in me and with people I've worked with, it often transforms into some other creative potential. Like the attraction is some other projection. It's not about sexuality or romance. It's about, wow, they're so good at managing their finances, and I wish I could do that. Or, wow, like they have, like we have the potential to build some cool project together, or do art, or make music, or I don't know.
Mm.
So this is a kind of a weird grounded example of like, yeah, this forgiveness, there's nothing wrong here. You may not want to express that because it's not the deeper layer, but if you can allow it to be present, witness it, hold it, and in the right containers with the right attunement, with safety, with if you have a deep relationship, even talk about it and work through it with each other.
Mm.
It's incredible the kind of light and love that comes out.
Right. So that's making me think of our conversation last week when we were talking about the value of like diffusing. Um, yeah, I'm thinking about the course principles, very, very purposeful principles, such as, the golden rule being you don't make the error real, and how that's reinforced with what could be just like almost like an obvious observation regarding the orientation that they explain with like you don't bring you don't take light to the darkness, you
Right.
bring darkness to the light because darkness can't stand in light. It's just in the nature of what light is, it's going to dissolve darkness. um, and that same principle really seems to be prevalent in what you're explaining. It's like shining a light on that area in your mind, or letting the light into, or letting the belief in there being no light in that area of your thinking just go.
Yeah, exactly. In the where, yeah, where like a light is illusions and sorry, the darkness is illusions and the light is truth. So it's like, yeah, bring the illusions to truth and let them evaporate, let them disappear.
Mm.
And yeah, and so this kind of weaves in all the stuff we've been talking about, like the illusions are all those constructs we make, all the meaning, all the words we wrap around this experience of kind of undifferentiated being or happening.
Mm.
So it's like, yeah, let's bring those into the light of consciousness and see
Yeah.
see what's here. And yeah, that has been for me at least a practice. Like it's always available, and I've had these moments of boom, but it's been a practice of cultivating this awareness and this capacity to continuously be like, oh yeah, that's an illusion.
Mm.
And one of the ways I do that is through inquiring into me, but also inquiring into the relationship and into the others. Like, you seeing this differently. Cool. Let's hear about it because it'll show me how both of our perspectives are illusory.
Mm. Excellent, because I'm also thinking, uh, make the unconscious conscious. It's like I get the sense that if you were on your own on a desert island, this is something that interests you. As you rightly said, as like a form of play, not as something to engage in to correct something or put the world right or whatever. It's just in the makeup of your personal identity, you have a leaning to this interest.
Yeah.
And then whether or not that's something that you're saying to yourself, or okay, so how do I feel about this? Or if you're asking someone else, then it's like turning this thing over on all these different sides and being able to look at the whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I've got this, and I'm sure you felt this too. I'll be curious to hear. But there's this feedback loop of like doing that enough. What's underneath all that really is this quality of love. Like, oh my gosh, like what a beautiful being. Or like I can see into your eyes and look at your history, your suffering now and in the past, and your triumph moving through it and being the person you are today. And it's like underneath all of those stories and all those illusions, this love just kind of naturally bubbles forth. And it's so nourishing to feel that. It feels so alive and it feels truer and it feels more beautiful. And so it's like this feedback cycle. Some of my biggest just struggles and self-judgments are because I know that is possible. And if I'm not in it, it's like I know I'm in a falser reality and I'm like longing for God in that sense. And then I'm judging myself for it. It can be painful. And of course that's the beautiful opportunity right there to see to hold that with the same love.
Excellent, because Kieran J, who was on last week, she said you've got to have forgiveness for your forgiveness process. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. It's like, wow, of course, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the feedback loop because I noticed that in your vocabulary and I thought that's really cool. That's really helpful. And it struck a chord with me of the energetic field of what we're transmitting and therefore what we see as returning to us from the mirror, you know, as it says in the course that the world is an outward picture of an inner condition.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah, what talk to me about your feelings towards feedback and the feedback loop and why that symbolizes what it does to you.
Once I was leading a group in Peru, and I can speak Spanish well enough to lead a group in emotional processing, but I'm not, native speaker by any means. And I accidentally translated feedback into nourish back. And I really like that. I'm like, I can't even remember which is the actual correct translation anymore, but I'm just like very happy to use either one to think of it as nourishment, like feedback as nourishment.
Mm,
And that it, it's definitely that's another thing that I think that we can train. I think that's the thing that's so cool about the perspective of training is that like nothing is set in stone. Like the thing that's difficult about the perspective of training is that it feels like there's some place to get somewhere and
mm,
that like it's not all already here and fine. But I think people can use that kind of Zen, like you're already awake, like it's all already done to kind of beat themselves up and be like, oh crap, I'm not there yet.
mm,
So it's like, no, absolutely everything is trainable, no matter what conditions you're from.
mm,
And so we can train ourselves to see feedback as nourishment, I think. And it can be really savage at first when you fully take this as truth that like whatever you're seeing is an outward picture of the inner condition. Because there's a lot like if you're seeing like war in the Middle East and you're horrified by it, it's just like, wow, that's me. Are you sure? Like
mm,
that it's a pretty dark reality here. I know we've touched on some of that before. And then yeah, it's just so tempting to want to make other people the problem. It feels so safe. It feels so justified
mm.
to just blame someone else. Like, surely this is not my fault. This has got to be someone else's fault. Like, it's just like it's built into us.
Ontological guilt.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you see it play out even in like, with my kids, I can see despite our best efforts to kind of empower them, there's a lot of things that we make the choices for them. And so they develop these habits of kind of like whining and complaining and asking for things because, and they're kind of like blaming us for their experience. In some ways, it's like rightfully, in the world of form, like if
Mm.
my son's like, well, I don't want to go to school at his daycare,
Yeah.
like he doesn't really have a choice about that external condition.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, like just facing that alone, it kind of makes my stomach churn sometimes to
Mhm.
just really be like, yeah, I have a friend who says I'm the one. That's her number one principle. Is like, I'm the one, I'm the one, like I'm the one in charge here. It's kind of a radical self-responsibility.
Mm.
Um, it feels right. It feels like what A Course in Miracles is pointing to. It's like, yeah,
Mm.
that it really is a mirror, it really is a reflection. But once I've kind of overcome the like shock of I guess essentially it's my own self-judgment, that guilt that I'm hiding from, of feeling like I separated from God. And then I'm actually finding forgiveness in it. It's okay. Like, yes, this is me. Yes, I am that war and that devastation and all of those things. And that's part of who I am. And I start to get bigger and bigger, and the I that I identify as is less and less like this guy right here in this body,
Mm.
but more and more the totality of experience.
Mm.
And then I'm
Yes.
like, it's okay. It's already okay. Already okay to be that. And I become much more available to respond with love to those things.
Right. So then that builds some velocity for the feedback loop.
Right.
And the feedback loop is just about non resistance, it's just about allowing. And then again, I'm thinking of like from the course, a couple of things coming to mind. One being beware of the temptation to perceive yourself as unfairly treated,
Yeah.
alongside, which I guess it's exactly the same thing but different words. When you want only love, you will see nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so sometimes I try to, I mean, I try not to tell anyone anything that they don't ask for. So I don't say this that often, but if somebody asks for it, or if it's appropriate, or if I'm excited about it and it's just something I'm sharing, then I think it can be helpful to like to separate out um, kind of ability to respond or responsibility from cause, from like blame or moral or ethical,
Yeah,
all of that. And so it's because then I can say, look, I can do something about this, and it doesn't mean anything about whether it was my fault or
yeah,
whether there is a fault at play.
got you. So it's not
And so,
judgment based. It's just an observation, which comes back to this aspect that's very clear in your um, being, which is to to inquire, and whether that inquiry, like we've said, is either internal or external, quote unquote. The motivation is it's not judgment. It's to uncover.
that's
And
right.
you use relatefulness as a very purposeful description of an activity, and then that's us coming back to relative reality, the Holy Spirit using your relationships as classroom. And relationship, something I like to talk about is it can be relationship can be with thinking, with a place, with a memory, with a person, with an activity.
Yeah,
It's not specific to people, and it's important to have that freedom, and the way I guess you're encouraging people to relate to the experience of being is through their inquiry and through just like a gentle like a gentle standpoint where there's like an opportunity to look at yourself with that same. So if you're demonstrating, if you think in the course where it says to teach is to demonstrate, if you're demonstrating a non-judgmental inquiry that asks somebody to share something, and they feel permission and they don't feel judged, then really, once you've done that in that relative scenario and you just slip away and leave them on their own, then your motivation is to say, right, now do that for yourself on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. Ideally, I want to be replaced. Uh, yeah, and I mean, I'm saying this in you're saying this, first of all, I'm thinking, oh, you're so cool, Leon. I just like the way that you make sense of stuff and the language you use and how you're relating it to a course and just appreciating you as you're talking
Thank you.
about it.
Thank you. Lovely. Appreciate that back.
Yeah. Um, and then right now it's really sweet because what I have present is appreciation and things like that. But and I've also practiced really hard. I've built these habits and these muscles for over a decade,
Mm,
uh, almost 15 years. I'm meditating for almost 20 years now.
mm,
So when you come into a relateful space, it's not always gentle. And mostly it's because we're just not perfect. And we're giving everyone the freedom to be able to learn and play together. And so it's a sandbox, it's a playground.
mm,
People scrape their knees, and I feel sheepish about that in some way. Like I want to make it clear because I don't want it to seem like there's some sort of like Shangri-La. Like it is in some ways. It is a kind of beautiful place where people are really trying to be present and loving towards each other. But it just often means that we have to go through some really tough stuff.
mm,
If what I notice in me is like a reactivity or a judgment, or I can't quite own the projection, like then usually bringing well, it just depends. It just depends on who's there, what's available, all of that. Um, and
But
I
I
think
guess you would shine the light on yourself. If you had that, I don't know, for want of better language, an imperfect behavior in the moment, then that's equally valuable or regarded experience to then look at that, isn't it?
exactly, yeah, exactly. And that may be the most like I often come in to a space if I'm leading or if I'm coaching, like assuming I'm going to get the most from it. Even if other people are paying me to be there, I'm like, all right, I'm going to grow the most here.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Right, I'm going to pull up something from my notes.
There's
Awesome.
another thing that got
Yep.
to be really clear as you were talking
Yeah,
about
please.
it kind of you can be relate to a memory, you can relate to everything.
Okay, yeah.
Uh, it reminds me of this when I was first reading the course, it was like timeless or outside of time. Like, what does that even mean? I don't quite, how does somebody have an experience outside of time?
Mm,
But what you were saying reminded me that people can probably get a taste of this just by feeling the present moment relationship they have to something like a memory or a fantasy. So the memory is in the past, the fantasy is in the future, or some alternate timeline. It doesn't matter. Um, and as you notice it, it doesn't matter. Like the memory is not actually here, and yet here it is in your lived experience affecting you.
mm,
And you can feel stuff if you think about sometime you were extremely well received and you're hanging out with a bunch of friends who love you, and you instantly shift if you start to think about like a time when you were bullied or made fun of, and you'll feel your body might even shrink, or it's right here.
mm. Interesting. That's making me think about in the course when it says, at no single point does the body exist. It's either remembered or anticipated, and the body being the symbol of like a border around the perception of the self as being a localized, discrete point in consciousness. Um, and then the miracle being a device which can operate outside of the construct of linear time and the world because it's not bound by past, present, and future as perceived through that discrete stroke localized point of consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I like that you're like, when I was a trance, I was like, oh, that's cool.
So yeah, it is a device. It is an experience in the moment where if we think that it's almost like falling in on myself with language because
Awesome. Keep
think
going.
thank you. So if we think or if we don't think and we're in the moment and love is our reality and our experience of truth and the interconnectedness of perfect oneness, there's no past and future, there's no present, there's no body. It's this experience of like what the course will say is like, mind is pure abstraction and mind reaches to itself, with the purposeful use of like extension rather than projection. Love extends, the mind extends, and coming back to what we're talking about with your natural expansion to want to inquire and to encourage others to inquire, that's just extension, that's just growth, just you know moving out from that central point that doesn't exist because the center is everywhere all at once forever. So there is no dimensions of space and time, but there is an expansion of just potential through shared experience of being, and the formlessness of silence, and the freedom of that inclusion in that silence is when there aren't any boundaries, there aren't any constructs, there's no scaffolding or framework that you have to like operate within or reach parameters of. And the mind training that you're talking about is that removal of the opposite of that, which is, well, okay, Leon, I need to now be here listening to Jordan and and this and that, and that's the ego thought system. All of those things are just obvious go to, well, of course, and that's
Right.
the programming that you have to, I don't know if disregard is the right word, I'll use that, go beyond, ignore, allow, not identify with is probably a good one because it still runs from pretty much everybody.
Mm.
um, and in that non-identification, that's where underneath that is the larger playing field, should we say.
Yeah, right. And you start to another way to say it is like if as you're disidentifying with that, you're identifying with that larger playing field.
Yeah.
And eventually with the whole game. So you're the players as well as the field. You're the memory, you're the separations, you're the ego. It's all fine. It's all pervaded by that formlessness, or it's composed of it. And then we don't have to talk fast. We don't have to talk at all. Maybe we sit here and record 20 minutes of silence, and that's what's wanted, and that's the best thing.
Very nicely put.
Or maybe that's what we're doing anyway.
There's an appearance of activity,
Yeah.
but the truth, the substrate, is the silence.
Yeah, so I think Ken Wapnick is the guy that I just learned this from so much of like you don't have to change anything in the world of form. We can keep talking, we can keep ordering food, making money. What doesn't matter what we're doing, like it's just seeing it for what it is. Like the point is not to stop talking and record silence. It's not to not do that. If we want to do that, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's it's to really see that activity. Oh, Leon, you should say this. You should listen. Jordan, you should make a good point. Like to just see it for what it is. Like that's the stuff of hiding from a fake guilt. And so that's a place where I can step back and love if I want.
Mm.
And if I don't want for whatever reason, that's okay too. I can step back and love that. And the end is certain. The only choice we get is the time it takes to get there. So I can take longer if I want. It's all right.
I'm wondering about the type of work that you do with people, getting them to do this self inquiry and to relate to themselves, one another, and experience. And then I guess, I'm not sure if it's a biblical quote where Jesus says, be be in this world but not of this world, or something like
Yeah.
that. And then coming back to what we were saying earlier about the course, to teach is to demonstrate. Um, and then the relaxation of knowing that everything's already done and sorted and perfect, and you don't need to run around and try and solve everything and change the world. Seek not to change the world, but to change the way you see the world, or whatever it says in the course.
Mhm.
How do you, what am I circling around? I suppose I'd like to know how, when you're working with people, do you have an inner, you could say like an unspoken motivation that you quietly imbue in your interactions with people, knowing what you're really up to and what's really going on, but not putting it into the form and just allowing it so that they've got the freedom to play in the sandpit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I almost think of it as like multiple layers and the each layer is kind of like more like separation in some sense or like illusion. So it's in a way it's a recapitulation of the whole creation of the universe. But I think in some sense my intention is teach only love, for that is what you are. Straight love, teach love. That's what it is. And right now I'm doing that. Like I have the Relateful company and we teach relatefulness and train this relational presence basically.
Mm,
And then I've got this tech startup where we're trying to bring similar principles into social media,
mm,
designing better algorithms.
mm,
And so then each of these has a very different way of engaging. Like, how do I teach love? Um, the next layer down, like in the relateful space, is in some ways I try to like, yeah, we are aimed at love or truth or the intersection of love and truth. Um, and a lot of what that looks like most of the time is kind of clearing out my intention for anything to happen. Because if we're in a space together and I want you to grow or have a good time or tell your friends and all of that is it has nothing to do with you really. It has to do with me
right.
and what I'm projecting onto you. Even if I see that you're massively struggling and I think I know how to fix you, um, the idea that there's something to fix is already buying into this concept of illusion, of brokenness, of something to forgive. And so my practice, even as a leader, is often to try to return to the source, to the root of what is it that's going on for me.
Mm.
And so one way I can do that is to self-inquire, and another way I can do that is to really resonate with the other and find, if you're going through a struggle, I'm like, well, I felt that same thing. How am I feeling that right now? And I can feel like yeah, actually, I hadn't done it earlier, but we were talking about family members, and I've got a family member that, yeah, there is a kind of struggle with right now, and that I can kind of see myself in you and see a way in which we're joined, or we're working on a similar karma, you could say. And I mean that in the sense the Course in Miracles says of curriculum.
Yeah.
We're working the same lesson.
Mm.
Yeah.
But you're
And
not
so,
looking for an outcome to overlay. You're aware of your own, the way the mind could try and think of an outcome for the other person. So you're refraining from that activity.
yeah, not just refraining from it, using that desire to love myself, essentially. Oh, look, there's another thing that I have excluded from the kingdom of heaven.
Mm.
Here's some way of being that I said wasn't okay and needs to change.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So let me say yes to it. Let me love it. Let me say it's totally okay as it is. And then if I want it to change, I can change it. But let me be really sure that I'm really going to be okay with it as it is. One example of this is that came to mind is I was in a group one time, and there was a guy who I could tell was just like not, in this case, it was interesting. It was like the whole group was like loving and supporting him, and he just couldn't let it in.
Right.
And I just really wanted him. I almost got angry because I was like, I really want you to like just let in our love. And then as soon as I was like allowing that out and to be seen, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't need you to let in my love. Like, I am loving you no matter what. Like it's totally unconditional. Doesn't matter whether you let it in or not. And then I kind of like was like, like in this unconditional love, which is grand. It feels so good. And the course, the great irony is that then, boom, he let in the love. Soon as I let go of my need for him to do that, it became available. But it didn't matter to me at that point because I was like, right, this is about me touching into unconditional love and allowing that to express, at least for me.
Mm. There's only one of us here.
Yeah.
Very nice. So something I heard you say then, which came brought my attention on some of the notes that I've got from last week, was to do with the classic I'm never upset for the reason that I think.
Yeah.
Where have I got that? So yeah, I've got here something that I heard you say where you're saying someone's hurting, they're never upset for the reason they think. And like we said earlier, honor it, validate it, go to the real thing. And then that's like also bringing into play like compassion and true empathy, which is that very purposeful openness where you're not making the error real.
Right. Yeah. So you can imagine, let me pick an example, like a spouse being like critical. Oh, like you forgot to do the dishes yet again.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously from the at least from my point of view, from A Course in Miracles, it has nothing to do with the dishes. The dishes are a symbol of something, which are a symbol of something, which are a symbol of something. So it's like you can usually follow that train down, but because it's not about the dishes, you just don't have to defend yourself. In my defenselessness, my safety lies.
Mm.
Like, right. It sucks to wake up when the dishes aren't done. Like, and especially when you're expecting them and I promised I would do them and I failed yet again. Like that's so disappointing, right? That's the validate, honor. Like, of
Hmm.
course, I would feel the same way if the same thing had happened to me and I was in your shoes. And then why? Why is that disappointing? Oh, it feels like I bet it feels like I just don't even care about you and um like your needs don't even matter. And that's a really bad feeling, right? And then you can kind of keep following that down, or maybe you know the spouse, like, oh gosh, that reminds me of your mom. Like, and then you can address what's really going on. I can see that, and I really do care about your experience. And I'm not your mom. And so like here I am loving you and demonstrating it in my way of receiving you. So even just receiving them is already demonstrating the opposite of the thing that really matters to them. I'm just kind of constructing this example from the moment. We could pick
Yeah,
any
no, I like it.
a boss, like, why aren't you working harder? Like, I expected you to stay till 6 every day or whatever. It's Friday, you can't take off early. Well, like, what's really going on? They must be scared. They've attached their value to the productivity. They feel powerless and helpless. They can't do the work that you can do. Um, there's deeper stuff under that. It's like, right, they're scared, they're helpless, they're powerless. What's going on? Like maybe they're afraid they're going to lose their job. Maybe they're getting pressure from their husband. Who knows what's going on?
Mm.
But you can often feel into it and get access to it through that deep empathy, through that joinedness. Like there's only one of us in the room, so it's like, yeah, fuck, I know what that's like, and let me find that in me. Like when I'm scared and helpless, yeah, I feel like if I don't do the right thing, I'm gonna cease to exist in some way. I'm like I don't deserve to be here at all.
You're not
And if,
going to feel love, or you're not going to feel that you're being loved, or love's available. I think it's almost like that simple, isn't it? Really, it's just like the expression of love or the call for love, isn't it?
that's it exactly. And exactly, if you can go right there, you can just jump right there. But if it can help to kind of almost go through the heart in a way, like go through compassion of like,
Mm.
right, I know what that feels like. And now I can love both of us for what it's like
Mm.
to be in this situation, which we both know is feels so real and so
Mm.
horrible.
Right. So what I'm getting now from that is like your lens when you use this principle of like everything's either an expression of love or a call for love, and you have your lens where you use feelings to relate, then what you can do is the energetic signature of your relatefulness has the frequency of truth in it because you're drawing on your own experience, and that honesty and that authenticity helps the other person maybe to articulate or not articulate in their own mind that they are making a call for love,
Yeah.
because you're jumping into that embodiment, that sort of personification as well, in order to honor it and validate it, and almost like that helps to accelerate getting back on the good foot.
Right. Exactly. It's very counterintuitive, but it's yeah, there's really well said. I love what you said. And there's almost a leadership quality to it because I'm like, I actually love being human, and I'm going to like demonstrate the truth and reality of that and show that it's okay to go to the depth of this vulnerability or authenticity or whatever, and that like whatever happens, it's going to be okay.
Mm.
And and now that I've shown that it's okay by doing it myself, it's like the water's fine. Come on in. When and if you're ready.
Yeah. And again, to tie in the conversation, it's like you've got no desire for an outcome.
Right.
Get in or don't get in, as you've just said, when you're ready, when you're not ready, if you're ready or when you're ready, rather.
And it can be so simple. I was just talking with my wife about this because she's like, yeah, I don't know what like she'll go and get a massage and then they're like, okay, well, I'll leave you to put on your clothes or whatever it is. And then she's like, am I supposed to like wait for them or say goodbye? Like I tip online. And so like she's kind of feeling awkward about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my way of, she's like, what do you think I need to do? And I'm like, well, my way of dealing with it is to just say that directly to the person and find out like, hey, I feel a little awkward at the end because I don't know if you want to say goodbye or not. Like, do I stay longer or leave earlier than other people or what's your preference?
Right.
And she's like, I can't do that. But when you're really not attached, like I actually don't care whether I stay longer or leave. I just want to find the way, the frequency of love that you can hear here
Mm.
or that I can receive. Either one. I don't know which one. I don't really care which one. Like the relationship is one thing. So like let me just be very direct and open and honest. And it can be really um disarming, but people tend to respond super well.
Mm.
Or another example of this is I met a really cool guy for the first time at like a dinner party the other day. And we went and got coffee and just talking to him, I was like, I think you need to date my friend who just got out of a relationship a few months ago. And so I brought it up and he was like kind of open to it. And I was like, all right, I've met him one time. And so afterwards he introduced him. He said it was okay. And I was like, sorry to be so forward, but I think you guys should go on a blind date. I don't know. Do whatever you want. And he was super grateful. And they went on the date and had a great time. This is in process. So I don't know what's going to happen yet. I just got the message today that they had a great time. And who knows what's going to come from it. But the guy was very grateful. He's like, it really helped. Your forwardness helps me
Right.
not have to beat around the bush with this woman that I introduced him to.
Mm.
Where we can really find out, like, we know what we're here for. We don't have to pretend, like, are we compatible or not? They're both in their 50s and
Mhm.
yeah, they can just, I remember a mentor once told me when two people are honest with each other, the relationship becomes what it's meant to be. So it's a lot of ways, it's just that. And all of the things we're talking about allows you to show up in these really silly, very human, very small ways. Like, how do I deal with this interaction? I've done this kind of thing a lot, like with I don't know, yeah. In America, we just have so much tipping. It's like everything. And I'll ask someone like if they delivered furniture, I'll be like, hey, what's the normal thing? Do people tip or not? Um, usually people are just super straightforward. They're like, oh yeah, like some people tip a little bit, a lot of people don't. And then I just decide based on what they say. Sometimes I say, oh, cool, well, I don't have any cash. Do you have Venmo? Or if they don't, and I know it's okay not to tip them, then I won't tip them. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, cool, here's what I've got. Like
Right.
it's so applicable in these very simple day-to-day relationships.
So you give yourself that same permission and freedom of movement that you give to the people that you're interacting with. But I guess why wouldn't you? Because it's your own approach.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it can be vulnerable. Like I have to make a decision. Do I tip this person or how much? You know, there's a vulnerability in being decisive and picking something.
Mm.
There's a vulnerability in that kind of freedom because, yeah, I'm not following a script. There's nothing pre-written. I'm kind of constantly surrendering into the mystery of what's next. And I love it. And I'm very unpredictable as a result, I think, and in a beautiful way, I hope. I mean, maybe people, maybe not, but I think people like it.
Brilliant. Lovely.
But in some ways, it kind of doesn't matter if they like it or not. Like I'll find the people that do. And what matters to me is that I'm demonstrating or teaching love, like we're saying. And so whether or not people, it's not about whether people like it or not, it's whether or not I'm communicating in my way of being or transmitting or the energy, like you're saying, of my way of being is doing what I'm setting out to do. And I'm allowing the world in these moments to be feedback about that.
Mm. Yeah, because the great course teacher Carol Howe is something that I repeat quite a lot. She talks about a division of 100% of communication, and she says like 7% of communication is the words we choose. The next 13% is how we animate ourselves and gesticulate and the intonations in our speech. And then the remaining like 80% is the energetic signature, the field, the transmission. And to an extent, primarily, or not to an extent, but like primarily, we are clairsentient beings. So if you or I to walk into a room, we're reading the energy of the room before we're taking our cues and signals from whether or not I said, "Oh, look at the weather outside today," or whether I said it in a way of like, "Oh, look at the weather," or "Oh, look at the weather today." You know, those things are secondary and they're third, but primarily we read that energy. And brilliant podcast host Danica Patrick, the I think she was like a NASCAR driver. Once she asked somebody, "Do you think truth has got a frequency?" And it just like just set a bomb off in my mind. It's like, wow, has truth got a frequency? It's like, of course it has. You know, that's what we identify with. That's what we read at that clairsentient level, that energetic signature in all expressions. And again, you know, then expression of love or call for love. Those two divisions almost dissolve into the one interpretation of like how the truth of what you feel about what you're experiencing as you be in a moment.
Yeah, I love that. And even though you said that, I get the image of like two sides of the same coin, like
Mm.
love and a call for love are kind of one, like love responds to love or and calls for love and calls for love are kind of pre-loved in their existence and in their allowance by being.
Mm. Yeah, I'm thinking in the course where it's like love reaches for itself,
Mhm.
mind reaches to itself. It's just, again, it's this extension, it's just this completely natural quality of the love and the light and the peace, of these descriptive qualities when we're told God is, and that, you know, that's as far as we need to go with the description. It's just, and just a natural, like a flower opening up or something, it's just in its nature, even, you know. And then in the world of form, if you think with the whole thing of like the universe is still expanding, and it's like, what's it expanding into, you know?
Right.
It's the same principle. Mind reaches to itself, love reaches, it's just extension, just
Yeah, and I love that thing, this 100% and 7 and 13 and 80. And one of the things it points to is like we really identify with typically that first 20%.
mm,
That like the words, and we're very good at using words, especially like consider myself a smart person. You seem like a smart person. So we've like built this very strong identity on that, like the 20% of communication.
right.
So on the one hand, it's again, it's very vulnerable to like release the identification and open up to the world of the unknown beyond that. The
Mm,
energy, the vibe, it doesn't fit into language very well. It doesn't fit into gesticulation. It's more of a transmission. It's more felt. It's more between. And on the other hand, it's so wonderful that we have this vast unknown territory to explore.
mm. Yeah, I love that because that's kind of like that's kind of like taking all of the sting and the seriousness out of the idea of separation, which
Mm.
is something that I kind of lean towards anyway as a person or as a student or however you want to describe it. It's just I have this like, oh well, so what kind of thing. And it's like a way of diffusing the guilt.
Hmm.
Um, and it's not like to say, oh, then there's this other flip side where it's like, well, you're not supposed to enjoy being here. This world was made as an attack on God and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, I get all of that, but, it's going on, isn't it? It's like you said, you enjoy being a human. It's like, you shouldn't be at this party. It's like, all right, well, why am I here? Does anyone mind if I have a drink? Like, those sandwiches look rather nice. Does anybody mind if I?
Yeah.
Because what's the flip side? Like, oh God, no, oh, shit. And then, oh, hold on a minute. Now we're making the error real. And I think that's a really interesting tipping point. It's like a fine line of
Yeah.
allowing yourself to enjoy the separation.
Yeah. I think there's a lesson that's like God's will for me is perfect happiness.
We love that.
Yes. Beautiful.
God's will for me is perfect happiness.
It really is a kind of fine line, like you're saying. And I think the way I relate to it is not trying to stay in the middle so much as like having the full range.
Mm, excellent.
So fully in enjoyment and play and laugh and seeing it's a dream and creativity and potential and like really go far out into like what's possible. In a way this social media project is like, yeah, well, it's vulnerable. Am I being ambitious because in a way that I'm making the world real, and am I just building up my ego? And it's like, yeah, I might be. I'll find out. I definitely will find out. And in any case, I might also just be playing. Like, let's have a cool, big imagination here. And on the other hand, it's like giving myself plenty of room to be extremely serious, like when I need and want to be serious, when that seems to be what it's called for, like to be sad, to be angry, to be in grief or awe or holiness or reverence
Mm.
or exaltation. It's like, yeah, I can really bow to like the sacredness of being. And it feels like this is what it means to not to be like in the world and not of it, is to have that full freedom. I don't have to push away from anything. If I want to, and in some ways, like the course just embodies this. It doesn't have to push away from masculine Christian terminology. It's perfectly fine to use that to have a deep mystical teaching as well.
Mm.
And it's perfectly fine if you want to. If you want to redo the whole thing and use they or whatever, that's fine too.
brilliant. That reminds me of Tam Morgan, like the president of the Foundation for Inner Peace, tells a story about her mum Judy. Many years ago, Judy's friend was really upset about the fact that all the pronouns were masculine in the course. And I think this lady was maybe hospitalized, and she made it her work while she was in hospital for a few months to go through the entire course and change everything from masculine to feminine. And by the time she'd finished, I think Judy said, how does that feel now?" She just like, "Oh God, I'm so over it." She didn't care. But but what's the double whammy of it is it made her read the entire course, like
Right.
such a fine detail.
It's so beautiful. Yeah, like that's, I mean, the Holy Spirit can use anything and will and does use anything and everything if you let it.
And why wouldn't it? Because it's just a lens, it's just a form of perception, but it's the only form of perception that leads away from illusion. So all the time we're having the experience of relative reality, we're going to have a perception involved because we've got this experience where there's A and B. There's some a point from which to perceive, and then something to perceive. It's the relationship of the relative reality. So everything in that field, indiscriminately, is the same because it's the lens that looks at it, and that lens has got within it the energetic signature, the memory of God, even though we can't fully articulate it because that's absolute reality and we're not in that experience. We bring there's a hint or a scent, or there's something with it that enables us to be in the world but not of the world. Whereas with the ego thought system as like an activity of mind, that memory isn't present, and all of these distinctions are distinctions, and they're all separations, and they're all of those things attest to, witness to, and verify that
Mhm.
thought system.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, you reminded me. I don't think we got to this last time, but one of my favorite sections, or a section that I find myself referring to a lot in the course,
Hmm.
is somewhere very early on. It talks about healing and taking medicine or something like this.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like, it's like take medicine or don't take medicine. Both are illusions.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. Like if you're going to use Western medicine versus Eastern medicine, but all of that is the stuff of illusions.
Mm.
And again, the point is to do, and from this section, it says like do whatever reduces fear.
Yeah.
If it increases fear to take the medicine, don't do it. If it increases fear to not take it, take it.
Mm.
So it's just, yeah, it's all about where is it coming from? Is it representing fear or love? And that's again like coming back to seeing and not even needing to do anything about it, but seeing which perception, which lens are you using? Is it the Holy Spirit's perception or is it
Mm.
the ego's?
Mm.
And yeah, once you notice, that's it. I think there's a cool part where also it talks about like the forgiveness process is essentially a three-step process, and then it goes to describe essentially one step. It's like, yeah, you notice and then you give it up to the Holy Spirit. And then the third step the Holy Spirit takes. So it's like you kind of just notice it. That's it.
There is lots of humor to be got from it all, isn't there? Even just in what could be thought of a very deep, dense, heavy read. I find loads and loads of stuff in the course makes me laugh, and just the exposure of stuff that would come across as rigid and serious and stuffy and blah blah blah. It's just like, nah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. Well, I think yeah, I think another fantastic addition to our join in. Um, there's a couple of things that I keep thinking that we've been alluding to, which is the therefore seek not to change the world, but to choose to change your mind about the world,
Yeah.
which is what we've said, and the be in this world, not of this world. And then there's a particularly lovely paragraph in one of the lessons where it says, there is a way of living in the world that's not here, although it seems to be. You do not change appearance, though you smile more frequently. Your forehead is serene, your eyes are quiet, and the ones who walk the world as you do recognize their own. Yet those who have not yet perceived the way will recognize you also and believe that you are like them as you were before. And this comes down to the whole like base level thing of like what we're saying about the energy and taking the form away. And it's just an energy. And it's like there is a way of living in the world that's not here, although it seems to be. You do not change appearance, though you smile more frequently. Your forehead's serene, your eyes are quiet, and the ones who walk the world as you do recognize their own. Yet those who've not yet perceived the way will recognize you also and believe that you're like them as you were before. You're actually just demonstrating that you have removed the interference to your awareness to love's presence by having a lightness of being. And don't need words, you don't need gesticulation, you just have an energetic signature. And I often find myself contemplating how I might drive past somebody with that energy, or they might drive by me, or you might see you in a shop or in a restaurant, and you're completely unaware of the interaction with that person because that comes into the whole thing of how far the ripples of a miracle travel, and how if you're just have that lightness of being, if you're just personifying that energy, that's your job. That's your job done. That's the undoing. That's the atonement. That's all you got to do. You don't need to stand on the street corner, even though if someone does, that's their thing, and we can get caught up in that language. But for the sake of this expression, um, you don't need to do anything other than have that lightness of being, which is the demonstration that you've cleared the heaviness and the belief in the guilt, and then somebody either asks you or doesn't ask. That inquiry again, bringing it back to your practice, that inquiry could possibly take place in the mind of somebody that you and I haven't met and never will meet because we just drove past each other on a road, but they went, what's that vibe? Yeah, I recognize that vibe. What is that vibe? And it's like, well, of course I recognize it. That's me.
Yeah.
That's the mirror, you know, reflecting back at me the
Yeah.
peacefulness.
I hope that happens with someone or many people listening to this recording that we'll never meet, and they recognize themselves in our vibe, not even in our words, maybe, and they recognize themselves and pass that on, and that ripple. Um, I don't even, let's say, almost like, yeah, like like love recognizes itself in a bunch of us.
Mm. And also, also the sort of freedom of allowing yourself to talk about stuff like this, not knowing where it's going to go, not knowing if you're going to forget something on the way to what you thought you were going to say, or you stumble on your words, or you think all of those ifs and buts are irrelevant because it's the I don't know if bravery or courage is the right expression, but it's just the allowing of just giving yourself the permission to talk about it because there's no consequence other than the the lightness and the unfolding and just representing and it might be that you and I spent an hour and a half and we took something 80% of the way and didn't realize it, but then someone else afterwards presses stop and they complete that 100% in there. You just don't know, do you? You don't need to know. Just do your own thing, clean your own backyard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really appreciate you saying that. It has me reflect like the one of the interviews you saw was the first time I'd really come out and talked really publicly about A Course in Miracles, and it was really a powerful experience for me to just be like, oh yeah, this just underlies so much of everything that I do, even though I've found different ways to talk about it for people who aren't into A Course in Miracles.
Hmm,
And it just feels so much more, I feel so free and open and conversational and casual with you. It doesn't have that feeling of like coming out at all. It just feels like, yeah, this is who I am and it's a joy to share.
brilliant, because that's the motivation. It's like my enjoyment of getting to know you remotely through my experience of watching you and thinking, lovely, this is, you know, spot on, and how I would want other people to have that exposure to your energy and your take on it as well, because we've all got of an equal value and worth in our perception and perspective. And when those, I'm thinking of the course now, ideas increase in strength when minds are joined. That's what's going on here. We're all putting our bit in the pot so that
Yeah.
everybody's included, and it's one of the themes with the comments that or the guys who follow the podcast have a sense of often a phrase that will be used is like they're in a restaurant on the table next to us and they can overhear, but they feel included, and it's brilliant. And the comments are lovely and
Mm,
time's an illusion. So everybody who's joining us after we've pressed stop, they are joining us in this journey and this experience. And the comments are beautiful and we're all just walking each other home.
yeah. Amen. And it's a beautiful, as you're saying that, I'm thinking like you're kind of coming out as, in a certain sense, also like in your wisdom, you get to show up with this depth of study that you've done with the course and how you've lived it and transformed so much in your life.
Mm,
And I imagine that like these people in the comments, it's like it allows them to recognize that in themselves as well.
mm,
That sense of, in the course language, yeah, we're all teachers of God.
mm,
It's like, oh yeah, wow. Like I really love what Leon said. Right. That's because I know it. Maybe I don't speak it as much, maybe I don't do a podcast, but like, right, this is reflecting the knowing in me of
mm.
that love and that awareness and that truth. And now it can shine more clearly from me.
Brilliant. Yeah, because doesn't it say in the course something like the teacher of God is just someone who recognizes a shared, I can't remember how they word it, but like a shared
Yeah. I don't remember exactly the words, but I'm tempted to grab the book and I'm like, I know
yeah,
where. But yeah, that recognizes there's no separate interests or something like that.
that's it. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, yeah, beautiful. So yeah, fantastic. Really, really enjoyed spending time with you. Thanks so much. Lovely.
Likewise.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah, it really is. I'm grateful. It's a pleasure. I'm grateful to get to know you and excited for whatever comes of this, whatever that is.
amazing. And we'll just keep on just keep on observing and allowing and giving permission. See, permission seems to have been a really nice recurring theme this evening.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's just like that. Yeah, permission, flow, non-resistance,
Mm,
acceptance.
mm,
Yeah, all of these are kind of ways of like surrender, or all these are all kind of ways of like the separate self taking non-actions to like fall into oneness in a certain sense.
excellent. You'd give up on language, couldn't you? Really, sometimes you sort of feel it, just like in the sentence you thought is, oh God, nothing means anything.
Seriously.
Excellent, a beautiful way to finish with a bit of laughter as well, and yeah, lovely.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your thoughts and time, and I look forward to the continuation of our relationship.
Yeah, me too. Tons of love.
Yeah, be well, dude.
Me too.